Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 71 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Tonight, it's just Brian and I. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good, man. It's our third year of doing this. It's sort of like going back to the old days when we were just winging it. So yeah, it's cool. You and me, and actually, it's been a long time since you and I did one. Just you and I, no guests.
Right, exactly. And so we kind of thought we'd start out, new year, and we wanted to talk a little bit about state of the podcast. We've been kind of giving everyone some stats here recently, but we just, how's everything going with the show, Brian?
Show's good. So, obviously we're, biased because we only see our side of it. But so a couple quick things for folks. Third year of doing this, so we're still interested in doing it. And I think people, it's been kind of interesting because the show's sort of taken on a life of its own. I think you and I have kind of found that we run into people at events and different things who have heard of the show. They haven't necessarily heard of us, but they've heard of the show, which is kind of weird, which is fine. It's good. The show's been growing. We're up. I think we grew about 6 times or 600%. We did about twice as many shows. We grew about 600%. So thank you to everybody who listens or tells a friend or distributes the show or whatever. So that's good. I mean, the show's growing. We put a bunch of videos on YouTube on our whiteboard channel. Those got a lot of attention, and so I think it's good.
And any day now, I'm going to do one. I promise.
I know. It's all. They're all mine. Although there's one we did with somebody else. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's still fun. I think here's the one thing I've learned about the show is we've always said we were going to be. I think when we started this thing, we were overly naive, or at least more naive than we usually were, and we sort of said we're going to be completely non-biased, right? We're going to run this thing outside of our jobs and run it non-biased, and so the two things I've learned are number one, in our industry, no matter who you are, there's no such thing as non-biased. Everybody gets paid or is sort of influenced in one way or the other, so I think we need to sort of rephrase it and say we're going to be we promise to keep it interesting. We will try and keep it as interesting as possible and keep the variety as high as possible. But we can't be 100% non-biased just because of either who we work for or just sometimes shows are tough because I don't know, people will reach out to us and we just kind of don't have any interest in what you do. No offense, but some topics have just been spoken about to death. So
yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest things I'd say for 2013 is I really think we're figuring out what people want to hear, which topics they like, which topics they've just heard enough about. Some of the other things too is potentially bringing back some news and actually brings us around to tonight. There's been a lot of articles really about enterprise cloud computing here in the last week. I don't know if it was everyone's New Year's resolution was to figure out how to get cloud in the enterprise all of a sudden, but lots of opinions flying around, and we're actually just going to talk about that a little bit more tonight.
Yeah.
And then something else we're talking about doing, and I think we've got it pretty well nailed down at this point, is potentially take the show into some new directions, actually with some potential guests. We're looking to kind of scale ourselves out, if you will. So we're potentially looking to almost have a mobile cloudcast and a platform as a service based podcast, and really even a European centric cloudcast. So looking to move into some new areas and really get some new topics and some new discussions for 2013.
Yeah, so I think those will be cool. We've been hitting some people up here recently, so what that means, and we'll get into more details as they come out. But we've basically we've been hitting some folks up that we really respect, that are very good in some of those areas like mobility and mobile and mobile apps and stuff, and then like platform as a service and so forth. That we're not going to so much bring on as guests because we've done that in the past, but we're almost going to let them, run a subset or their own variation on the Cloudcast that would be just focused on those things. So, we're hoping to get those spun up here maybe within, a few weeks, might be a month. But what you'll see intermixed in this show is some shows that have new hosts, and hopefully are some topics that you guys like, or if we've some things that we've seen people have responded to. So it helps us scale a little bit.
Absolutely. And two last things too is industry events. We'll probably be doing a lot more around industry events and community events this year. We're both of us have some new roles here, and it allows us to really get out into the community more and have a lot more of those face-to-face discussions that have actually been very popular throughout the year. And then lastly, we were going to talk about Krispy Kreme Challenge. How are we doing on Krispy Kreme Challenge?
Krispy Kreme Challenge is going good. So let's see. So a couple of things. So we said basically, so first and foremost, thanks to everybody who's made donations. We said that up to the first $1,000 of any donation people made, we're going to match that dollar for dollar. So we are officially on the board off the site that you can get to from our website, around $700 and some odd dollars. So, double that, we're at $1,400. And then you had sort of a land grab, or what I'll consider like an open source community-based donation. So you want to give us a quick update on? I have no idea how much that was. I just know it was a large pile of cash.
Yeah. So it's long story as to actually how it came about, but basically I was hanging out with a bunch of the Apache CloudStack folks this week, doing some planning and what we're going to do for the next year, and really they decided to pass around the hat at dinner. We started talking about everything, and we came up with $550 all total. Cool. And so I have to actually get that in the account and actually get some money converted over, because some of it was in dollars and some of it was in pounds, and so I got to do a bunch of transactions here, but that donation will go up shortly as well. So just a huge thanks to the Apache CloudStack team.
Very cool. So I think if I'm doing some back of the napkin math, that puts us around $2,200 or so with all the matching and everything like that. So our original goal was to get to $2,000. We've exceeded that, but we've got almost a month left. So we'll keep sort of asking folks to make donations, not for us or any way, shape, or form, but we're doing this for a very cool set of people at North Carolina Children's Hospital. So if you can give a little bit or a lot, it's definitely appreciated. It all goes to a good cause, and when you can watch Aaron and I we'll video it and do all the stuff like we did last year. And apparently there may be some other costumes or dressings up or other bad things that are going to happen to us at this thing, so stay tuned.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, enough of that. I don't even want to think about that. So let's get to this topic that came up here in the last, I don't know, it's come up not so much as like a new topic, but all of a sudden there's a lot of different viewpoints on kind of enterprise cloud, or what cloud computing is going to mean for the enterprise in 2013. So I think first and foremost, and we put a whole bunch of links that'll be in the show notes. So I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. I think first and foremost, I'm hoping that enterprises using cloud computing does not become the bring your own device or VDI of 2013. But I think what it basically means is we're going to have a lot of competition, a lot of options that will come to enterprises as far as how they run their IT, how their shadow IT runs. But unfortunately, it's probably going to mean, and we're seeing this already in these early articles, lots of debates about definitions and other stuff that makes us all blurry-eyed and stuff like that. So
right, and I really look at it this way too. Again, a double-edged sword. Good in the fact that we've moved beyond what is a cloud.
Yep.
And so it's nice that we're moving this discussion forward. This is a much more advanced discussion. It is really, okay, how are we going to get it into the enterprise? Because let's be completely honest with each other. The vast majority of the time, the enterprise is where the money is. And so everyone has been kind of, how do we make this work? Okay, I think I got an idea how we're going to make this work. Okay, great. Let's go make money in the enterprise, because that's where the money is.
Right.
And it's really interesting to me. And so we'll throw out some authors here, and again, go look at the show notes and go look at the links. But Rodney Rogers, who is with VirtuStream, and full disclosure, Brian has some announcements to make around that here shortly.
Yep.
Came out with, and he got kind of got the ball rolling with a pretty controversial article about AWS and their enterprise plan, and it was amazing to me, if you go look at the comments to that article, how many people you can tell were, really bring cloud expertise and a cloud view, and I would even dare say a cloud bias to the table. And then those that have an enterprise view, or even, take it a step further again, an enterprise bias. And it was very much, well, the enterprise just needs to change, and other people are like, no, the enterprise does not need to change. And coming from both backgrounds, I see both sides of it. I really do. And I don't see it as everyone seems to think this is a silver bullet, right? That cloud computing is somehow going to make the enterprise work, and if the enterprise doesn't work, they're just wrong, and this is the only way it can be. And I don't see that at all. And it kind of, if you go look at the rest of the articles, in my mind, it's really it is a cloud, and even if you want to say agile data center or agile solution, the dynamicness of it is just one more tool in an enterprise toolbox.
Yep.
Some applications are going to work, some workloads are going to work, some solutions are going to work, some aren't. There is absolutely some things in the enterprise that will never be converted over to cloud. For the same reason, hell, there's still mainframes in accounts today.
Yeah, and I think that's what you just brought up is sort of an interesting topic, and I think it's going to be one of those sort of definitional things. But let me explain why I'm saying that. So, so Rodney obviously wrote this article, and it's kind of saying, hey, it's tongue in cheek, kind of taking the viewpoint of, if I was an enterprise CIO, kind of telling Amazon, who came out obviously at the reInvent conference and said, hey, the enterprise is right in our crosshairs. That's what we're going after. And he kind of came and said, hey, it's great that you want to go after that market. You guys do a great job at what you do, but be helpful to sort of know how we buy as opposed to telling us how to buy. But I think there was another article in there that we highlight that was from Forrester. So it was from James Staten and the crowd from Forrester that kind of does that. And it was another one of these articles that said, hey, there's lots of things that can't move to the cloud, and the only thing that's the cloud is it has to be dynamically scalable, and it's sort of gotten away from is it self-service, is it on demand, can you pay for the resources you use, which are very much three core components of what we always used to call cloud. But it's sort of like, oh, well, let's not focus on that anymore. Let's only focus on is the environment dynamically scalable? Is the application dynamically scalable? And the challenge with that is there aren't very many of those applications, right? But when you think about, if we just brought this back to the money as opposed to just the applications, you've got a $4 trillion IT industry, the kind of worldwide IT industry, $4 trillion, and everybody kind of agrees 70 or 80% of that are applications that you're just keeping the lights on, really weren't designed to run in an agile environment, but could very much benefit from running somewhere else, could benefit from being able to be spun up kind of on demand, could be benefit from environments that do a better job of sort of charging you based on the resources that you use and so forth. And I think that's part of what we're going to see from the enterprise is them saying, hey, again, I only get 20% of my budget, and then maybe whatever shadow IT gets to do these things. This whole idea that I'm going to sort of flip everything over all of a sudden, I just don't have the money to do that. Right. And right. I think that's one of the, so there's part of it that's the technology that says, hey, could an application go to the cloud, or do I have the skill set to write new applications? Do I have the money to hire new people? But at the end of the day, we've sort of, there's so many folks who kind of nod their head when you go, they don't have a lot of free extra dollars to go, do the super cool stuff. So it's nice. And I think I think you and I sat around on a beginning of last year call, and we said, hey, one of our things that we would love to see happen by the end of 2012 is Amazon to have another premier showcase customer besides Netflix. And it's 2013, and we're still talking about Netflix.
Yeah,
we're the first guys to go on stage, and it's like, what else?
Right, exactly. And some of the other ones, like, it was funny when I was at the AWS conference. You and I, we were trying to line up some guests on this, and one of the ones we kept focusing on was trying to get the I forget the dude, but the guy that ran the Obama campaign.
Harper.
Right.
Harper. Yeah.
Yes, and he that was definitely one of the other kind of big things at the conference. But it really came down to, I had a lot of side conversations with a lot of people, and I think there was actually probably two big stumbling blocks that I think happened at the AWS conference. The first one was I found out at that conference the AWS message is very tightly controlled. Their marketing and how they're coming out, everything is on point, and it's usually everything is very lined up and very tight. But I forget who did it, but one of the keynotes, they basically came out and said, we're going after the enterprise, but then it turned right around and went, but the enterprise is doing it all wrong. There is no such thing as private cloud. There is no such thing as hybrid cloud. There is only our cloud, public cloud, and rah, rah, rah. And you could tell a lot of people afterwards were like, well, that's just crap. You know what I mean? And there was a couple things in the press that were said negatively about that. Like, I really think that message was the one thing that, I mean, they just kind of, it was like fart in church. I mean, it was just really bad.
Yeah. It's really hard. I mean, having, and I've done this, a few times before. I mean, we did, I'll give you kind of a similar type of example. When we were first starting to do, voice over IP, so this whole idea of, moving away from, what would be an analogous to legacy IT. So it was legacy telecom and old ways of doing it and non-flexible models. And we said, hey, we have this really cool, flexible, programmable model, and it's going to work with new devices and new applications. And we were all excited about it. It was very, very cool. And then, you'd start going into deals and you'd start going into customers, and they would go, well, that's all cool, except if you don't have that one feature where my secretary can page the boss, or the secretary can pick up the boss's phone line, which is a 20-year-old feature, or you need to be able to work with this 10-year-old voicemail system so that the light comes on my phone a certain way when I get a voicemail. And you went, ugh,
right.
God, and it was just this like
right.
kick. It was like this kick in the head, because you're going to slow down all this development and all this other cool stuff for us to do the stuff that's 10 years old. And it's like, and you realize, like, yeah, but you're not going to sell the deal unless you do some of that old stuff. And so it's, and this isn't a knock on AWS. This is the realities of anybody who goes in and says, I have a better mousetrap. And you go to people who say, that's awesome, except I have to retrain people in my organization. I have to learn a new way of dealing with you. I have to deal with a new process. I have to learn a new tool. I have to learn whatever. And they would much prefer that you change to work with them, the guy who's going to pay you money, than them change and them give you money.
Right.
And
And
So,
think about
right.
this
That's
too, to kind of go back to what I earlier, that second point I was going to say too about the AWS conference. One of the other reasons I really do think you're not seeing as many customers who will publicly say that they are doing a lot of business with AWS is because at the end of the day, you look at the Netflix model, for instance. The Netflix infrastructure, it is there to make money. It is a profit-driven, agile infrastructure. Think about that. Most enterprises, before we record, we were talking about this briefly. If you're making tractors, if you're doing finances, the back end systems a lot of times don't necessarily. It is a cost center,
yep.
And it is especially in the enterprise. Fund it as minimally as possible because you just want to keep the lights on and get through the next fiscal year, as opposed to rocking the boat, making changes, technology because we can go faster, do this, do that. Now, a lot of times, and it goes back to the enterprise toolkit concept, where where it is almost like a new tool in the toolbox is on that front end where, okay, you want to scale up to take more customer orders during peak time of the year and scale down, and so you're not wasting infrastructure when you don't need to. And it almost seems like the customer facing aspects are a noticeable good fit as a cloud workload or a solution. But the back end systems, and that is where a lot of times enterprises are, that's where the crown jewels are, don't necessarily fit.
Well, here's where I think so I think you're right. The other way to look at those, because I think we got to be a little bit careful. We're getting a little kind of tipping over the edge of being like, AWS is problematic. I think if we really boil this all down to it, it kind of comes down to, are you looking for applications or tools, business tools through technology that are going to help you go fast, or you need them very quickly, or are you looking for things that are going to run consistently in your business, right? And the market that AWS and every SaaS application and what PaaS is eventually hoping to kind of capture is that, everybody's kind of coming around to, well, it doesn't really save you any money. That let's take that off the table. It's about going fast, right? And and if we think about what succeeds in technology as opposed to maybe what succeeds in IT, we've seen that before. Like, people love Netflix because it's like, I feel like watching a movie, I can get it fast most of the time, right? SharePoint took off like crazy, and SharePoint, people hate it as an application, but you know what? You needed something where you could just throw documents up there and do some basic collaboration, and it was just included with the server, and you could get it up and running relatively easy. And it was like, I have a business need, I need something quick, right? Now, that's not cloud, but that's kind of that I want to get it going pretty quickly, right?
Sure.
And so we've seen all these scenarios where you're like, I need to do something fairly fast. And there's tons of great case studies from AWS and from other cloud providers. So it's not just an AWS thing where they go, hey, the guys who do whatever back-end function, right? They want to do analytics on a whole bunch of data. They want to throw up a website to do a dating thing, and they need 50 cores for the weekend, or they need 10,000 cores for 10 days, and they're going to turn it off. Those are perfect examples, right? You know how to build the application. You need the resources fast. You're not going to be able to go get it as a CapEx because it would take months to budget for it. You need it short. You need it for a near-term type of thing. But if you need the environment for something that runs steady state, which, whether people think that's cool or not cool, that's a good chunk of what IT does, right? In the enterprise, that's the 70 or 80% of the enterprise. It just kind of runs. It doesn't need all that other cool stuff. Could it benefit sometimes for some, kind of dynamic or intelligent upward scaling and downward scaling? Yeah, it could. But I think it comes back to it will be challenging to go after the enterprise, just because you're talking to them in such different language than they're used to. Whether you're talking about SLAs and how you're not really talking about SLAs as how much you're valuing, or how you're valuing risk, or how you're valuing downtime versus the business. Or you're talking about availability. What does availability mean? Well, it means this in an availability zone, but it means this in a region, and it means this in a... you're just talking a different language than those guys are used to hearing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
So, it's going to be interesting. I think, in full disclosure, we went back to it. We mentioned Rodney had talked about it, or written the article for TechCrunch. I took a role with those guys a few weeks ago, so I have a little bit of insight of where Rodney's coming from. But I think, he'd written about this before. About 3 months ago, he sort of wrote a, I'm not sexy and I know it article for TechCrunch, and basically said, hey, that's what the enterprise does. They run SAP systems, they build tractors, they write insurance policies, they build roads, they do stuff that, isn't going to end up on the front of Reddit. It's not going to end up on, Hacker News. It's not going to, you're not going to be, talking about it over chai lattes between 280 and 680 out in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a lot of business around the world that doesn't fit into that mold.
Yep.
They don't have hacker weekends about it in Portland for the new John Deere tractor that came out.
Well, and the other thing too is to kind of bring in one of the other articles. Their big focus was really around the AWS enterprise strategy not being in selling in the traditional ways that we may have been exposed to over the years, or the way the enterprise is even used to doing business. AWS is all about disruption.
Yep.
And I absolutely get that, and I quite frankly absolutely agree. There's a lot of, again, going back to the conference, I talked to a lot of large enterprises. You would recognize their names, but they didn't give me permission to really speak publicly who they are, but really doing some just awesome things that were unique to the workload, kind of spin up, do some testing, spin down kind of things. And that was like, oh yes, absolutely. It not only is a perfect use case, it wouldn't even be possible without this kind of model.
Yeah.
And so, I also wanted to say, again, seeing both sides of it, I see the steady state go slow, and then I see the agile go fast. And again, it comes down to use case, right?
So here's kind of the interesting question. So there was one of the other articles that we listed, and there was an interesting. This got everybody, a little bit fired up. Was one of the financial analysts had basically said, hey, we think Amazon did roughly $2 billion this last year in revenue. We expect them to do $4 billion next year. And so, okay, fine. That's a growth number. But the thing that got people all revved up was they said, if Amazon would spin out AWS, we think they'd have a market cap of somewhere between like $20 and $30 billion. Right? So,
yeah, right.
So that was kind of interesting, but it was interesting in the sense of, here'd be something that would be kind of interesting to go look at, right? So if Amazon's $2 billion, right, and let's just say that's a fair estimate, and for the most part they've basically said, look, we've never gone after the enterprise, right? For the most part, I mean they'll tell you they have enterprise customers. They've never traditionally gone after what would be enterprise IT. How big is the shadow IT market? Right.
Yeah.
The market
right.
the market that traditional IT doesn't go after, and that's when you have to start looking at, I don't have enough data to sort of be able to scope the whole thing, but let's just take some basic things, right? So you've got, for example, Red Hat, which may or may not be considered an enterprise play, but is going to kind of live on that fringe between shadow IT and traditional IT. They do $1 billion a year, right?
Yep.
Versus what Microsoft does, $100 billion a year in the operating system market. You've got Salesforce, which is probably one of the top 5 or 6 SaaS applications, right? Paid SaaS applications. They did this last year. They did just shy of $3 billion in revenue, right? So you consider that sort of a shadow IT because it's not really run by IT. Granted, they're paying for it, but it's kind of direct line of business type of thing. So and let's say the top, let's say each of the top 10 SaaS applications were doing, somewhere in that range, $1 to $3 billion. So that becomes a $20 to $30 billion market. Those are all in packaged applications, right? Where you're actually paying for the application itself, which is CRM or WebEx or whatever else it is, Workaday or something. Is that really possible? Is the shadow IT market that big? Is it 30 or 40 billion on top of a $4 trillion market? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It's certainly possible. I think the numbers are probably slightly inflated, but it's certainly possible.
And the other thing I think it asks is if Amazon, who most IT organizations don't really know, and they're still kind of getting their name out there beyond the Clouderati kind of crowd and some of the developers. How big is the rest of the market for people that are ultimately saying, I'm willing to consume IT another way, right? I'm willing to look at other infrastructures, service players like Rackspace, or I'm willing to look at people that are going to stand up, new application environments, whether it's Azure or a PaaS platform or whatever. I think what we might be dealing with is sort of a shifting of the pie.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I wonder too, so completely unrelated to the articles, but just thinking out loud for a second, because I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when another public cloud provider from a major existing vendor that is out there, either hardware or software, so your HPs, your Ciscos, your VMwares, when there is another alternative to Amazon or Rackspace or some of these other companies, and it is a vendor that plays in the enterprise, has sales reps in the enterprise, has relationships in the enterprise, has a huge reseller and distribution channel already in place, and really all they need to do is take their enterprise sales reps, give them a larger quota on the new shiny thing, and really sell into the enterprise. How disruptive will something like that be? And how quickly because everyone at this point is assuming that AWS is the only game in town and will be the only game in town, and even if somebody else did, no one will be as good as them. But the simple fact is, a lot of times what I've seen over the years, being the best isn't necessarily guaranteed to bring in the revenue. And a lot of techies will be like, no, absolutely not. But it is the truth, and I've seen it time and time again selling into the enterprise over the years. Of a lot of times it's about relationships. A lot of times it's about sales quota retirement. A lot of times it's about all these other things. That it's unfortunately big business. Take it or leave it.
Well, and it's other real things. I mean, so let's say you're an HP customer today, and your budget crunched, or you're up for a tech refresh cycle or whatever it is, and your HP rep comes along and says, "Hey guys, you want to move to more of an OpEx model in the HP cloud," and you go, "Well, what's in there?" And they go, "HP hardware and software, like I've been selling you for 10 years." Like the amount of switching costs may be far less than taking on a new model, than taking on a SaaS model for an application, or a different infrastructure as a service vendor, or even, we see it all the time. People buy the same vendor stuff even though there's new, better stuff, because just the cost of switching and retraining and reprocessing and retooling. And so you're right. I mean, if
don't forget bundling too. If they go with something, and let's say you're looking at a public cloud alternative, but it's an existing enterprise vendor owns that account. Oh, well, hey, continue to buy our servers and we'll throw the public cloud in for free, or vice versa, buy the public cloud and we'll just throw the servers in just in case you need them.
Well, I mean, think about think about all the deals you've been engaged with for whoever, where one of the sticking points was, well, how are we going to train my people? And you went, okay, well, I'll throw in 50 training hours, and I'll throw in this, and I'll where do you go and get AWS training? It's the same could be said for Rackspace's OpenStack Cloud. Where do you go to get that on a regular basis, as opposed to just going to San Antonio, where it's not available through kind of the traditional places yet. So yeah, those things that's the kind of stuff that can it take off? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why businesses can't be built, but that's the kind of stuff and the cost involved that I think people don't really realize need to happen. And especially if you're spinning up an IIA, an infrastructure as a service offering, you're still making the assumption that somebody else is going to run those applications. Somebody else is going to secure those applications. Somebody else is going to figure out availability for those applications. And, if you don't have a way to train the people, you don't have a way for them to go to, facilities and learn things, to get access to tools that they can reuse, it makes things real tough for those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. If nothing else, it'll be an interesting 2013. And I do really believe in 2013, I'm not going to say it's going to be the year of cloud, because that almost jinxes it, just like the year of VDI. But I do think that just by these first few weeks, 2013 has a different vibe to it, that at least we're talking about some different things.
Yeah.
I think that is a good thing.
Well, I think we're gonna get very, very quickly. I think we're gonna get to the business of getting back to the business of what does technology do for your business, or how does technology improve the business as opposed to just purely the technology. I think we've had a lot of years where it's like a lot of new technologies, and other than maybe SDN, which is going to have its own set of kind of muck to get through in 2013. I think the rest of the industry is going to spend a lot of cycles, having to justify to people in a tough economy, why they are going to help improve your business, and it's not going to be because of cool tech. It's going to be because of better ways to consume, better ways to transition from one environment to another, bundling, whatever the heck it ends up being. But yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of technical people are going to have to learn very quickly how to speak business lingo, or those types of things, understand the difference between CapEx and OpEx and interest rates and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. And if nothing else, I mean, hopefully everyone will realize that, it's really coming down to, it's not a silver bullet. It's not an all-encompassing solution. It is just another tool in the toolbox. And if the tool fits you, use the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's ultimately, it's time sharing of a giant computing system. And oh my God, isn't that what a mainframe does? Right?
Yep, it's true.
So, well, listen, man, we've sort of beaten this enterprise cloud thing to death, or at least we've kicked off enough conversations to spin up a bunch of other conversations. So, you want to sort of shut us down for the night and kick
absolutely.
us off for 2013?
So we're out of time for this week. So if you like the show, tell a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. As a quick aside, too, I've been trying to figure out here recently how to really tap in more of the Android market and all of the Android devices, but I don't know how you necessarily get podcasts and find us if you have an Android device. So if anybody has any ideas or knows what's going on and could help us a little bit in that area, please send us an email at show@thecloudcast.net. So quick aside there. So as always, you can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcastnet, or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to everything Cloudcast. So thanks for listening, everybody.